At 6:58 a.m., the emergency department at St. Gabriel Medical Center was already awake in a rough way. Fluorescent lights hummed over scuffed tile monitors, chirped in uneven patterns, and the automatic doors sighed open and shut as if the building were breathing. A paramedic shouted vital signs across the hall, while a janitor pushed a mop past streaks of dried blood that refused to disappear. The air smelled like antiseptic and burned coffee with a thin metallic note that clung to the back of the throat. Riley Hart moved through it all as if the noise belonged to someone else. Her badge swung against her scrub top, the plastic catching the light every time she turned, but her eyes stayed level, watchful. She checked a dressing on an elderly woman's leg, the gauze already stained through, then tightened the wrap with quick, sure fingers. The patient winced once. Riley murmured something quiet, barely more than a breath, and the woman's shoulders loosened. From the nurse's station, Jenna Walsh watched her over the rim of a travel mug. Jenna's blonde hair was twisted into a bun that looked casual and took 20 precise pins. Beside her, 2 other nurses leaned in closer so they would not have to raise their voices. 3 weeks here and she still doesn't sit down, one of them said. Jenna tipped her chin toward Riley's left arm. The cuff of the scrub sleeve had ridden up as Riley reached for tape, revealing the thick, pale scar that crawled from wrist to elbow in a jagged rope. "Look at that," Jenna murmured. "Tell me that is not a story." "Motorcycle crash," the other nurse guessed. "Or some ex who pushed her through a window." Jenna smiled without warmth. "Or she tells everyone she fell. People like that always fall." On the far end of the bay, a resident barked into a phone trying to get a cardiology consult that refused to pick up. Another nurse struggled with a printer that coughed out blank pages from MedCoreX, the hospital's new patient management system. A bright poster above the nurses' station showed a stage photo of smiling staff beneath the slogan, "Embrace the future with MedCoreX." Someone had drawn devil horns on the R. Dr. Victor Lang stepped out of the glass-walled admin office and into the corridor. His white coat was immaculate, his tie a shade darker than his eyes. He did not walk so much as cut a line through the traffic expecting people to move. They did. He paused near the nurse's station, checked his watch, then swept his gaze over the room until it caught on Riley. "Is that our new MedCoreX champion?" he asked, voice cool. Jenna straightened. "That's Hart, the float from Valley Crest. She, still does a lot of things by hand." Lang's attention sharpened, by hand. He watched Riley for a moment longer. She was talking to a teenage boy with a sprained ankle crouched to his eye level, the tablet in her hand, still dark. She traced the air above his foot, explaining where the ligaments were, what a sprain meant, what he should feel, and what he should not. The boy nodded more at her tone than her words. Lang's jaw flexed. "This hospital invested 8 figures in a system that tells us exactly what to do and when. If she's not using it, fix that." "Yes, sir," Jenna said. He walked away, leaving a faint trail of clone and pressure behind him. As he passed, Dr. Arjun Patel stepped aside, balancing a tray of coffee cups with one hand. Patel's hair was mostly silver, his shoulders a little stooped, but his eyes missed very little. He followed Lang's back with a tired look, then let his gaze drift to Riley. Her hands, he noticed, did not hesitate. They moved the way some people breathed. Not rushed, not showy, just certain. Riley finished with the boy and keyed his information into the computer at the triage desk. The MedCoreX interface bloomed with colors, graphs, and warning icons. She clicked through them in a few economical motions, ignoring the blinking suggestion to wait for supervisor review. She glanced at the clock on the wall. The kid needed a splint and discharge instructions, not a committee. "Ms. Hart," a voice said behind her. She turned. Dr. Trevor Mills stood there, white coat open over wrinkled scrubs. He was not much older than she was, but his stethoscope seemed to believe he outranked everyone in the building. A red line from his glasses had imprinted itself along the side of his nose. "You skipped the MedCoreX clearance step again," he said. "It flags that." "The ankle is stable," Riley replied. "Non-weight bearing for a few days at ice elevation. He will be fine." Trevor huffed. "That is not the point. The system keeps us covered." "The kid does not care about coverage," she said. "He cares if he can walk by Friday." Trevor opened his mouth, then shut it. Something in her gaze made him look away first. He reached for a tablet on the counter instead, pretending to check a chart. When she stepped aside, Jenna slid into the space Riley had vacated. "She has a mouth on her, huh?" Jenna said lightly. Trevor shrugged, not ready to agree or defend. "She moves like she has done all this before. A lot." "Maybe in another life," Jenna replied. "Or maybe she just likes an audience." At the far end of the bay, a stretcher burst through the automatic doors, pushed by 2 paramedics. A man in his 50s writhed on the gurney, clutching his chest, sweat shining on his forehead. Monitors squealed louder. The intern at triage stared at the screen where MedCoreX was still buffering a spinning circle, sitting where the triage priority number should be. "Is it not loading?" he muttered. Why is it not loading? Riley had already started walking. She did not wait for the system to assign a color. She caught the paramedic's report halfway down the hall, laid a hand on the man's shoulder, and bent low to hear his breath beyond the noise. "Sir, I am Riley," she said. "Look at me." His eyes fluttered, found her. While she held his gaze, her other hand found his wrist, fingers settling over the pulse. Too fast, too thready. Something in his color bothered her, a gray that did not match the numbers she heard shouted around her. "Bay 3, she called. "Get cardiology on the line, now." The intern at triage glanced between his frozen screen and Riley's back, then finally moved. Somewhere above the MedCore X system, finished thinking, and flashed a triage priority that matched what she had already decided. Later, when the man was wheeled toward the cath lab and the monitors in the bay finally went quiet, Jenna watched Riley wash her hands at the sink. The scar on Riley's arm stole the nurse's attention again, the raised tissue catching on the water beads, of it clinging like rain on old concrete. "You ever get that looked at?" Jenna asked, coming up beside her. Riley shut off the tap and reached for a towel. "It works," she said. Must have hurt. Riley considered the mirror rather than Jenna's face. The fluorescent lights made the room harsh, every flaw amplified. She dried her hands slowly, the towel dragging over ridged skin. "Some things hurt once," she said. "Some things hurt every time you talk about them." She tossed the towel and walked back out into the noise of the ER, where the next ambulance was already backing up to the doors. Dr. Patel watched her pass and wrapped his hands around his coffee cup for warmth. The room felt cold despite the crowd. Riley's badge swung again as she moved the photo on it slightly out of focus, like no one had managed to catch her still. He took a slow sip and kept his thoughts to himself. The next 2 weeks slipped into the shape of a routine that belonged more to the building than to the people inside it. Morning shifts blurred into afternoons, and the neutral walls of the emergency department held the echoes of sirens and shouted orders like a kind of weather. Riley took whatever was handed to her. Stitches, A4 lines, fall injuries, panic attacks. She moved from bed to bed, chart to chart, filling in gaps without drawing a line under her own name. When a patient was anxious, she pulled the curtain most of the way and lowered her voice. When a patient was angry, she let them be angry, kept her hand steady, and did not take it from them later. MedCore X did not like her. On the monitor at the nurse's station, her profile started to gather small red flags. Deviation from suggested workflow, incomplete use of diagnostic prompts, manual override of triage recommendation. The system did not care that the diabetic with the normal-looking vitals had a certain smell to his breath, or that the old man who insisted he was only there for his wife kept rubbing his left arm without noticing it. Lang cared, not in the way a doctor cares, in the way an owner of a new car cares when someone forgets to admire the interior. He watched reports populate on his tablet in the quiet of his office. So many staff names scrolled past that they turned into blur. Hart's name did not blur. It repeated a neat column of deviations and overrides. He called Jenna to his office one afternoon. She came in clutching a clipboard against her chest. "How is Ms. Hart fitting in?" he asked, tone light. Jenna shifted her weight. "She gets things done. Patients like her, she, sometimes decides before the system does." "That is the problem," Lang said. "This institution has protocols. MedCore X is one of them. We do not need improvisation." "Right," Jenna said. "Of course." "I want you to shadow her this week," he said. "Help her adapt. Make a note of any instances where she ignores the system." The way he said help made the hair on the back of Jenna's neck stir. She nodded anyway. In the crush of the next overnight shift, Riley barely noticed the eyes on her. Jenna appeared wherever she turned, always a few steps behind a thoughtful wrinkle on her brow, a pen ready to move. On a chest pain call, Riley asked for an EKG before MedCore X finished registering the complaint. On a suspected stroke, she called for a CT the moment she saw the way the man's face sagged on one side, before the system decided his priority based on the incomplete data. Jenna wrote it all down. The break room at 3 a.m. felt like a different universe. The lights were softer, the hum quieter. Someone had taped a photograph on the fridge of the last year's Halloween party. Half the people in it had already rotated out. Riley sat at the little round table by the window, a stack of charts beside her, her pen moving steadily. Coffee steamed in a cardboard cup within reach but untouched. Her eyes flicked from page to page, filling in the blanks that the system had not caught. Medications, allergies, the way a patient had reacted to being touched. Trevor pushed into the room without knocking. He went straight to the coffee machine, stabbed at the buttons, then turned when he realized someone else was there. "Oh," he said, It is you." Riley glanced up, gave a small nod, and returned to her notes. Trevor took his coffee and leaned against the counter, breezily casual in the way people are when they are not casual at all. He watched her write the way she pressed a little harder on certain words. No family. Lives alone. Jumps at loud sounds. You always finish your charts by hand like that, he asked. Helps me remember, she said. MedCoreX does that for you, he replied. That is the point. It stores everything. It does not store how they looked at the doorway, she said, or how they tried to joke but held onto the bed rail with both hands. Trevor took a sip of coffee. It was too hot. He swallowed anyway. You know what people say, he went on, aiming for a laugh that did not quite arrive. We have rules so no one thinks they are a hero. She kept writing for another line as if he had not spoken. Then she set the pen down. I do not think I am a hero, she said. I just do not want to stand there and watch while something preventable happens. The fluorescent light hummed. A machine clicked gently in the hall. Trevor's jaw tightened. You think that is what the rest of us do? Just stand there? She lifted her gaze to him. Her eyes were not sharp or accusing. They were tired. I think the system makes it easier to wait, she said. Sometimes waiting is the same as standing there. He felt the words land a little too close to the thing he did not like about himself on nights when he stared at the ceiling instead of sleeping. He turned away, fiddling with the stack of sugar packets beside the coffee machine. You handle IVs like you are starting lines in your sleep, he said. You call orders like someone who has run comms under fire. Riley blinked once. You have a colorful imagination. Trevor pushed off the counter. I have a brother who deployed twice with the Marines. I know what it sounds like when somebody talks like they do not have time for hesitation. The charts waited between them, quiet testimonies. Riley picked up her pen again. Go get some rest, Dr. Mills. You are dangerous when you try to read people. He let out a breath that was not quite a laugh and left. At the end of the week, an email went out to the whole staff from Lang's account. New schedule, new hours. Riley's name appeared less often on the ER roster and more often in small print beside data entry support and non-clinical tasks. She read it slumped in a chair in the supply room, the smell of latex and alcohol swabs steady around her. Jenna stood near the door holding a box of tubing, not quite meeting her eye. They are shifting you for a while, Jenna said, as if Riley had not already seen it. Administration thinks you need more time with the system. Riley scrolled to the bottom of the message. There was no end date listed, just until further notice. I see, she said. You can talk to him, Jenna offered. To Lang. Maybe if you explain how you like to work, he will listen. Riley slipped the phone into her pocket. Has he ever listened to you, she asked. Jenna hesitated. That is not the point. It usually is. Riley reached for a box of saline flushes on the shelf. I will do what the schedule says. The next week did not smell like blood as much. It smelled like toner and stale air and the cheap citrus cleaner they used in the administrative wing. Riley sat at a desk pushed against a wall in a cramped office beside the billing department. The screens in front of her displayed MedCoreX dashboards instead of heart rhythms. Her hands moved over the keyboard, entering data from stacks of printed forms. She missed the weight of a pulse under her fingers more than she would have admitted. The building sounded different from here. The sirens arrived muted, the voices distant. Sometimes she caught a glimpse of a gurney through the gap of a half-closed door, like a scene from someone else's life. On her lunch break, she walked out of the hospital by the side entrance, where the smoking area had been converted into a patchy square of grass. The sky over Austin was wide and hard blue. She took a bus across town, then another, switching without checking the posted schedules. Her feet knew the route before her thoughts caught up. The free clinic sat between a tire shop and a laundromat. Its sign was sun-faded, the plastic cracked at the corners. Inside, the air tasted of dust and gentle disinfectant. The waiting room chairs were mismatched, but the magazines were recent, and someone had left a bowl of hard candy on the counter. Back again, Ms. Hart, the receptionist asked. She was older, with a knitted cardigan and reading glasses on a chain. If you still need hands, Riley said. They always needed hands. Most of the patients who came in wore their past across their bodies, tattoos and fading ink, scars that matched no surgeon's map, limps and missing fingers and faces that tightened at sharp noises in the street. Riley took blood pressures, changed dressings, listened to stories when people felt like telling them and never asked when they did not. One man in a worn Marine Corps hoodie watched her coil a blood pressure cuff and tilt his head. You served, he asked. Riley folded the cuff. I worked around people who did. He studied her a moment longer, as if trying to place her in a memory that would not quite focus. She wrote his name on a chart, her handwriting neat and small, and moved on. By the time she caught the last bus back towards St. Gabriel, the sky had gone a deep purple, the city lights coming up in pockets. Her reflection in the bus window floated over the passing storefronts, double exposed, not entirely part of either world. The morning after the clinic shift, the air around St. Gabriel felt heavier, as if the night had left fingerprints on the glass. Riley arrived before the sun cleared the parking structure, her breath a faint cloud in the chill. The automatic doors opened for her with their usual soft sigh. Inside, the warmth smelled the same as always, cleaning solution coffee, the ghost of something metallic. Her name still appeared on the ER board, just not as often. That morning it glowed in dry marker beside a modest list of assignments: triage support, wound care, float. She tied her hair back at the locker, checked that her badge sat straight, and tugged her scrub sleeve down over the familiar raised line on her arm. The fabric caught slightly on the ridged skin before settling. The department was in that narrow space between quiet and chaos. A few patients dozed behind curtains. A television in the waiting room murmured about traffic and politics to people who were not listening. The MedCore X screen at the nurses' station showed a grid of names and colors that shifted every few seconds as new information trickled in. Dr. Patel stood near the board, stirring powdered creamer into a cardboard cup. He gave Riley a small nod. "Morning, Ms. Hart," he said. "Morning, doctor," she replied. He tipped his cup in the direction of the monitors. "Looks calm." Riley checked the clock, for now. She had just finished changing a dressing on a post-op patient when the double doors at the ambulance bay slammed open. Two paramedics pushed in a stretcher at speed, their coated shoes squeaking on the tile. A man in his early 50s lay on the gurney skin, a chalky pale shirt, cut open, dried blood on his side. 53-year-old male, the lead medic called. Found on the warehouse floor. Complaints of abdominal pain, then collapse. Hypotensive en route. We lost a pulse 2 minutes out, got it back. Lost it again 30 seconds ago. Monitors screamed as they rolled him into the nearest bay. A junior attending Dr. Lewis hurried over, snapping on gloves, eyes wide. "What is his pressure now?" she asked. "Useless," the medic replied. "He is not perfusing." MedCore X populated his profile in the background. Name. Possible internal hemorrhage. Suggested protocol. Predicted mortality. The cardiac monitor showed a fragile line, then flattened. A single high continuous tone filled the room. Dr. Lewis checked a carotid pulse, then looked up at the clock. "Time of death, Vim 12, she said quietly. "We are not getting him back, not without a blood bank in the truck behind him." The medic looked like he wanted to argue, then pressed his lips together. He unplugged his cable, stepped back, and rolled his shoulders as if he were trying to shake off the case. Someone reached to pull the curtain. The monitor was shut off. The man on the bed suddenly looked like a body instead of a person, as though the word had changed him. Riley was in the next bay, wiping down a cart. Her hands paused for a second when the tone began. She heard the call, heard the time given. Cases ended. They all knew that. She finished with the cart, carried the used cloth to the bin, then turned back. Through the gap in the curtain, she saw the edge of a white sheet being pulled over a still chest. She saw the attending's shoulders slope, the paramedic rub a hand over his face. She also saw the smallest movement that did not fit. The sheet tremored near the man's throat. Not much. Just enough to nudge a wrinkle of fabric near his collarbone. It stopped, then came again a faint hitch. Riley stepped closer. "Hold on," she said. Dr. Lewis looked up weary. "Ms. Hart, we called it." Riley moved around her without pushing, fingers already reaching for the monitor leads. "Then something is wrong with the call," she answered. "You heard the report," Lewis said. "There is nothing left to work with. The system flagged him as non-salvageable at the door." Riley pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck, just below his jaw. For a moment there was nothing, the same blank that everyone else had found. Then underneath her fingertips, the slightest kick. It faded, then returned weak, but there. Her hand went to his chest. She leaned close enough that the room's noise dropped away, and only his body existed in front of her. There. A shallow rise that should not be there in a dead man. The words left her mouth without hesitation. "He is not gone." Lewis shook her head. "We cannot throw resources at every lost cause. MedCore X gives us the odds for a reason." "His odds just changed," Riley said. She slapped the power button on the monitor. It came back to life in a scatter of static before resolving into a thin, ugly rhythm that still meant more than a flat line. "Get the crash cart," she called. A nurse at the doorway froze. "We already documented time of death." Then updated after Riley answered, "Cart now." Something in her voice moved the nurse before her thoughts could catch up. The heavy wheels rattled against the floor as the cart rolled in. Riley lowered the sheet, placed her hands in the center of the man's chest, and started compressions. Her palms drove down hard and fast, ribs shifting under the force. The sound of bone and cartilage pushing against bone and cartilage was unpleasant but familiar. Dr. Lewis hovered. "You are opening us up to so much liability." "Liability is when we do nothing," Riley said between counts. "Bag him." A respiratory therapist grabbed the bag valve mask, sealed it over the man's face, and began to squeeze in time with Riley's compressions. Air moved into lungs that had not been ready to quit. Trevor appeared at the edge of the bay, drawn by the sudden cluster of bodies and the renewed beep of the monitor. He took in the scene at a glance. The sheet half off the patient. The crash cart open. Riley driving compressions into a man whose death time was already in the chart. "What is happening?" he asked. "Apparently we are revising the call," Dr. Lewis said, exasperation and doubt wrestling in her voice. Trevor looked at the monitor. The rhythm was feeble, but it was there. He watched Riley's hands, the way every push was the same depth, the same angle, the same refusal to let go. "You pronounced him," Rutherford said. His voice had dropped its confident gloss. "I pronounced what I saw," Lewis said. "What you saw changed," Riley replied. "Epinephrine 1 milligram, now." Trevor hesitated for half a second, then grabbed the syringe himself and pushed it through the IV. If they were going to be in trouble, he was already in with both feet. Time boiled down to the count in Riley's head. 30 compressions. Pause. Check. Still no strong pulse. 30 compressions again. Her arms burned. Sweat trickled down her spine. The smell of antiseptic and the faint copper tang of old blood thickened while the rest of the world narrowed to the space beneath her palms. On the monitor, a complex wave stuttered, tried to die again, then steadied into something more regular. "Come on," she murmured. "Stay here." She shifted her weight, felt under his jaw again. This time the pulse arrived more quickly, thumping against her fingertips with reluctant life. "I have a pulse," she said. "Check the pressure." The cuff inflated around his arm. The numbers inched up on the screen, thin but climbing. The respiratory therapist let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Dr. Lewis stared as if she could not quite believe she was witnessing her own reversal. Trevor took one small step back, the reality settling. "You just brought back a dead man," he said. Riley adjusted the man's head, checked that the airway stayed clear, and did not look away from the monitor. "He was not dead," she said. "We were." The words came out lower than she intended. She did not mean them for anyone but herself, but the bay had gone quiet enough that more than one person heard. From the entrance to the ER, another observer had arrived. Dr. Lang stood with his tablet under his armcoat, immaculate as ever. He had been looking for someone else, some other issue to sign off on when he saw the open crash cart. His gaze tracked the scene, the half-pulled sheet, the active code on a patient whose status the system had already moved to the deceased list. The way his staff looked not at MedCorp X, but at the nurse whose name had populated his tablet in red flags for weeks. He did not see the faint motion under Riley's hands or the way the man's skin had deepened from gray to a fragile pink. He saw deviation. He saw a direct challenge. "What is going on here?" he said. It was not a question. The sound cut through the murmur of the bay. Dr. Lewis flinched. We had declared. Ms. Hart observed residual activity and initiated resuscitation. "On her own authority," Lang said. Trevor opened his mouth, but Lang did not look at him. "His heart was still there," Riley said. He responded. "He has a pulse and blood pressure." Lang stepped closer, folding his hands behind his back. His attention went to the chart displayed on the wall monitor. It clearly showed the time of death that had been entered neat and final. Then it showed a flurry of new activity. Code drugs, procedures, vital signs. "The system registered this patient as having no viable return," he said. "You overrode that." "The system did not have its fingers on his neck," Riley answered. A small, dangerous stillness entered his expression. "This is exactly what I have been trying to prevent," he said. Chaos. Mixed messages. Staff taking it upon themselves to ignore established calls because they think they know better. His voice rose enough that people in other bays began to glance over. "You are welcome," Riley said softly. The air in the room tilted. Lang's face heated. "Do you think this is an arena for you to grandstand in front of your colleagues? This is not a battlefield. This is a hospital with policies that keep us functioning." Riley stepped back from the bed at last. The man she had worked on was being stabilized by others, now lines taped down, machines adjusted. "He is alive," she said. "That is functioning." Lang pointed toward the doorway. "You are done here, Ms. Hart. Effective immediately. You are terminated for gross insubordination and repeated violation of protocol." The words fell into the space like a dropped instrument. Trevor took a half step forward. Dr. Lang, with respect, she just saved a patient that MedCorp X had given up on. "And what happens when this patient's family sues because we've prolonged suffering against medical advice?" Lang shot back. "What happens when insurers see we ignored our own system to chase a miracle based on a feeling?" "Feelings do not generate blood pressure," Riley said. "His numbers do." Lang's lips thinned. "Pack your things. Security will escort you off the premises once your shift is closed out in the system." There was nothing left to say that would change his mind. Riley looked at the man on the bed one last time. His chest rose and fell in a clumsy but real rhythm. The monitor hummed along, arrogant in its certainty now that the hard part was over. She stripped off her gloves, tossed them into the bin, and walked past Lang without lowering her eyes. In the cafeteria, Dr. Patel sat alone at a corner table, his breakfast cooling in front of him. From where he sat, he could see a slice of the ER through the glass. He watched Riley cross the hall with her shoulders straight and her face as unreadable as ever. He watched Lang follow, speaking sharply, his hand chopping the air for emphasis. Patel could not make out the exact words. He did not need to. The posture of everyone around them told the story. He touched the rim of his coffee cup, turning it once. "I have seen that look," he murmured to himself. On corpsmen who came back from places without names on a map. He took a slow sip, his gaze lingering on the flash of pale scar visible as Riley pushed open the door to the staff corridor and disappeared inside. The staff corridor felt narrower than usual, the walls closing in around the rows of beige lockers and sagging bulletin boards. Someone had pinned up a flyer about a charity 5K run. Somebody else had written over the date with a black marker. "Good luck finding time." Riley spun her combination lock and tugged the metal door open. The inside of the locker was almost bare. One folded sweatshirt, a small battered field handbook tucked into the corner, a pen with a cracked casing. Her lunch sat on the top shelf in a paper bag, starting to go translucent from whatever had leaked. She sat on the bench and exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath since Lang said the words. Terminated, done, finished. Her badge hung around her neck, still warm from her skin. In a few minutes it would be a plastic rectangle with no purpose. Riley took it off and set it inside the locker for a moment beside the handbook. Her fingers brushed the spine of the book, feeling the wrinkled cover through the thin film of plastic she had taped over it years ago. Underneath there were dog tags she never wore, looped through the spiral binding. She did not pull them out. She swapped her bloody scrub top for a clean one, then for her own shirt. The fluorescent light flickered once as she lifted the scrub over her head, leaving her arm bare. The scar that twined from wrist to elbow looked harsher without the blue cotton to mute it, the raised tissue casting its own shadows. The door banged open. "Riley," someone shouted. "You still in here?" Jenna stumbled in breath, short hair coming loose from its pins. Her eyes were two wide pupils blown black under the harsh light. "You cannot be in here right now," she said in a rush. "We have a multi-trauma. Construction site collapse on 5th. They are bringing them in fast." Riley pulled her sleeve back down. "I was told to pack my things." "I know what he told you." Jenna shook her head, hands flat against the air as if she could smooth something out that would not lie flat. "We are short-staffed and the attending is tied up in surgery, and the backup is still 20 minutes out. They just radioed. One of the victims is critical. Young woman crush injuries, vitals tanking." The alarm that underscored every code in the building sounded faintly overhead, muffled by concrete. Code yellow. External disaster. "Call in more nurses," Riley said. Her words were even, but something behind her ribs shifted. "You have plenty." "We do not have you," Jenna replied before she could stop herself. For a second, neither moved. The metal bench, the fluorescent hum, the smell of bleach all waited. Then the overhead speaker crackled. "Mass casualty incoming to emergency. All available personnel to the main bay." Jenna swallowed. "Lang is in a meeting upstairs. Nobody has time to ask what he wants." Riley closed the locker door. The latch clicked shut with a small dry sound. "My bag can wait," she said. The emergency department had changed in the time it took them to walk there. The quiet gap between cases had vanished. Stretchers rolled in a staggered line, voices overlapped. Someone shouted for more oxygen tanks. Another yelled for blood. Dust clung to the clothes of the people coming through the doors. Concrete grit, pale and fine, turned dark where it mixed with blood. The first patient, a man in an orange safety vest, moaned behind an oxygen mask, one leg bent wrong. The second, a woman with a gash on her forehead, clutched the hand of a coworker on the next stretcher, refusing to let go. The third stretcher came in faster. Female 20s, the paramedic called. Construction worker. Scaffolding collapse. Unresponsive most of the way. Hypotensive tachycardic sats in the low 80s. Possible chest trauma. The woman on the gurney wore a hard hat that had cracked right across the middle. Someone had taped it back together on the ride in, as if they could fix her that way too. Her work shirt was torn, plaster dust stuck to her eyelashes. Purple marks mottled her chest and neck, blooming under her skin. For a heartbeat, no one claimed her. Riley felt the space open around the bed, that dangerous hesitation when everyone tried to calculate at once. Resources, expertise, time. Jenna turned to her, panic sharpening the lines of her face. "Do not," she whispered. "Lang said you are done here. He will hang us both if you touch a patient." Riley looked at the young woman on the bed. The girl's lips were turning the wrong shade. Her chest rose shallow and fast, one side lagging behind the other. Her eyelids fluttered, but there was no real focus in the motion. "She does not care who is fired," Riley said. She stepped to the gurney and laid a hand on the woman's sternum. The ribs shifted under her palm, some stiff, some giving too easily. The breath sounds on the left side were faint like air trying to push past something that did not want to move. A resident hurried up, clutching a tablet that already displayed the patient's half-completed profile. Vitals, he asked more to the screen than the paramedic. BP 60, palp, the medic answered. Heart rate 140. She tanked right before we hit the ramp. Med Core X is suggesting rapid imaging and fluid resuscitation, the resident said. His voice trembled just enough to betray him. We can stabilize and send her for a CT. Riley shook her head once. She does not have time for a field trip. The resident blinked at her. Excuse me, Ms. Hart, you are not assigned to this case. If you wait, she arrests on the elevator, Riley said. Listen to her lungs. He hesitated, then fumbled for his stethoscope. He leaned in, moving the diaphragm across the chest. His brow furrowed. I can barely hear left side, he muttered. She has a tension hemothorax, Riley said. Blood and air taking over the chest, crushing the lung and the heart. That is why her pressure is garbage and her trachea is starting to shift. She needs decompression now. That is a physician procedure, the resident protested, almost reflex. You are not privileged for thoracostomy. Are you? She asked. He stared at her, stunned into silence. The room seemed to tilt again. Voices rose. Someone in the next bay called out for platelets. Another yelled for a portable X-ray. For a fraction of a moment, nobody moved to reach for the tray that would matter most here. Riley did. Set up for a chest tube, she told the nearest nurse. Large bore needle and a scalpel. High-flow oxygen. 2 large IVs if you do not have them already. Jenna grabbed the tray without conscious thought. Her hands shook as she opened sterile packaging and slid it toward Riley. The resident wavered on the edge of action. If something goes wrong, they will say, we let a nurse cut into a chest. If we do nothing, there is no chest left to worry about. Riley answered. The worker on the bed gasped, a thin, ragged sound, her eyes rolling under their lids. The monitor showed her pressure dropping again, the numbers bleeding down the screen. Riley snapped on fresh gloves, her mind dropping into a place where fear had no room. Noise turned down, focus tightened. The smell of dust and blood settled into a familiar background. She palpated along the side of the woman's chest, counting ribs under skin that felt cooler than it should. When she found the right spot, she nodded once. Cleaning, she said. Jenna flooded the area with antiseptic. The brown liquid ran in thin streams, catching in the hollows. Local, the resident asked weakly. She's barely conscious, Riley replied. We do not have the luxury. She took the scalpel and made a clean, firm incision between the ribs, the blade parting skin and muscle with a sound that barely registered under the beeping monitors. The woman's body twitched. Riley's jaw tightened, but her hand stayed steady. Next came the needle, thick and unlovely in her grip. She advanced it through the incision, feeling the sudden change in resistance as it slipped into the pleural space. The release came with a low, wet rush. Air and blood surged out, a mix of dark fluid and trapped pressure escaping, like something exhaling after holding its breath too long. The chest wall moved differently at once, less stiff, more willing. The monitors responded almost immediately. The waveform of her blood pressure crept upward, the oxygen saturation numbers inching toward less terrifying territory. Her heart rate eased down by a few beats. Breath sounds, Riley asked. The resident listened again, hands trembling. Left side is louder, he said. His voice sounded surprised. They are actually there. Good, Riley said. Keep her warm, keep the fluids going. Get that chest tube in to follow. Do not let anyone send her to CT until her pressure is stable. He nodded, the first hint of solid ground under his feet again. At the edge of the hall, a man with a cane had stopped walking. Staff Sergeant Miguel Reyes had come to St. Gabriel for a follow-up on his leg, 3 screws and a plate that still ached when the weather turned wrong. He had expected a long wait, a quick exam, and another prescription for physical therapy he already did on his own. He had not expected to see her. He recognized Riley before he understood what he was looking at. It was not her face, which had been streaked with dirt the last time he saw it. It was not her voice, though it hit the same part of his chest now as it had then. It was her hands. They moved with a speed and certainty he knew too well. He had watched those hands once in a city across an ocean slick with sand and blood as they worked on a Marine who had stopped moving in the middle of a street. He moved closer without realizing his cane clicked louder on the floor. Each step brought more detail into focus. The scar on her arm, the way she leaned over the patient using her own body shield against the flailing of limbs she could not control yet. The quiet that seemed to settle around her even while the room roared. Miguel stopped at the edge of the bay, fingers tightening around the handle of his cane until his knuckles went white. That scar, he whispered, not meaning to say it out loud. Jenna looked up at him, then back at Riley. He saw the moment the needle went in and the slow, ugly relief of pent-up pressure, saw the numbers shift on the monitor. heard the collective breath of the staff as the crisis pulled back a fraction. Yeah. He had seen it before, just with different uniforms, different dust, different screams. Doc Hart, he said louder this time. Riley was taping lines when the name cut through the noise. It was not the hospital version of her name. Not Ms. Hart or Nurse Hart. It was the nickname shouted across open ground, shortened by urgency. She froze for half a second, a pause so brief most people would have missed it. Then she finished the tape and straightened. Miguel stepped closer. His face was older than in her memory lines carved deeper around his eyes, but the set of his jaw was the same. His left leg dragged faintly with each step. "You were in Fallujah," he said. The word came out raw. "You were the courseman, attached to 2nd Platoon, the one who covered the lieutenant when the IED went off. Hart. Doc Hart. They said you died." Jenna stared between them, the chart in her hands forgotten. The resident blinked, unfamiliar with the name of a city that lived mostly in news footage to him. Riley's posture tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the patient on the bed. "This woman needs us," she said. "Keep her airway clear, watch her pressure, she's not out of danger." Miguel took half a step closer, hope and guilt and something like awe fighting in his expression. "You saved 6 men in a blown-out alley while we were taking fire," he said. "I watched you tie off a leg that was half gone with your own belt. I watched you drag a lieutenant bigger than you behind a burned-out truck. I never forgot your face, or that scar." He gestured toward her arm. Conversation had quieted in a radius around them. The words did not bounce so much as sink. Riley glanced at the young woman on the stretcher, then at the other beds, the forms moving behind curtains, the eyes watching from doorways. "Do not," she said. Her voice did not rise, but it stiffened. "There are patients who do not know anything about that street and do not need to. They only need to know if we show up for them now." Miguel swallowed hard. He brought his heels together almost unconsciously, standing a little straighter despite the cane. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Riley gave one small nod as if accepting a report. Then she reached to adjust the oxygen mask on the worker's face, the motion efficient and almost gentle. Somewhere in the building an elevator chimed. In the bay, the monitors kept up their steady argument against the worst-case scenarios that had been hanging over the room a few minutes before. Riley peeled off her gloves and pulled on a new pair, already turning toward the next call for help. For a brief stretch of minutes, the emergency department rode a jagged plateau. The worst edges of the collapse cases had been blunted. The young worker's blood pressure held in the numbers Riley could live with. Orthopedics appeared to claim the man with the broken leg. The rest of the staff found the kind of steady rhythm that felt almost like calm if you did not listen too closely. Riley stepped back from the construction worker's bay and let herself breathe out. Sweat pasted the collar of her scrub top to the back of her neck. Her hands smelled of antiseptic through the latex. She flexed her fingers once and felt the familiar ache in the joints. Jenna brushed past her, muttering about more warm blankets and depleted supplies. Miguel lingered near the wall, watching her work in the way soldiers watched incoming weather. He caught her eye just long enough to offer a small, tight nod. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say. "Thank you. I am sorry. I thought you were gone." None of them fit the space between code calls and charting. The overhead speaker crackled. Code black. Multiple critical incoming from Camp Bastion Fuel Depot. All trauma teams to emergency intake. The words slid under the skin of the room. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Nurses abandoned coffee cups on counters. The residents who had started to believe the worst was behind them snapped back to attention. Riley felt it hit her chest. Camp Bastion. Fuel Depot. The combination painted a picture without any need for imagination. Fire shrapnel, the kind of burns that went beyond skill and into the realm of luck. She did not have a place on the trauma team anymore, not on paper. Her badge still opened the doors, though. That was enough. At the ambulance bay, the outside light had thinned to a hard gray. Sirens rose in chorus as the first wave of vehicles came into view, red and blue pulses reflecting off the glass. The doors burst open and a gurney came through with 2 medics hanging off the sides, guiding it as if it might buck. "Male mid-40s," the lead medic shouted. "Marine Lieutenant Colonel. Fuel explosion at Bastion Depot. Burns to face and neck, suspected inhalation injury. Deteriorated en route. Airway is swelling. We are losing the line." The man on the stretcher did not look like a high rank. He looked like anyone would after too much fire. Soot and melted synthetic fibers clung to what was left of his uniform. The skin on his neck and jaw had blistered and peeled in places, raw red and white patches competing. His chest rose in short, desperate pulls. The badge on his tattered blouse still held a name under the soot. Rourke. The letters punched through Riley harder than the cold air from the bay doors. She stepped closer without meaning to. For a second, the room around her wavered. The tile under her feet became dust. The overhead fluorescent lights turned to an empty sky full of brown haze. Somewhere in that not-quite memory, someone screamed incoming and the world shook. A hand brushed her shoulder. Present came back into focus. Ms. Hart Trevor sat at her side. He did not ask why she had gone pale. "We need to move." They rolled the gurney into the nearest major trauma bay. Anesthesiology had been paged. The on-call trauma surgeon ran in, talking fast about burn protocols and airway management. An attendant snapped an oxygen mask over the man's blistered face, but the seal was bad, the plastic slipping against damaged skin. Rourke made a sound deep in his throat, a wet, choking rasp that tried and failed to be a cough. "His airway is closing," the anesthesiologist said. "We need to intubate now." He reached for the laryngoscope. His hand shook. It was not much, just a tremor, but the blade in his grip caught the light in a stuttered way. Riley watched his eyes. They flicked to the burned tissue inside Rourke's mouth, the swelling tongue, the char matted in his beard. He saw the risk, the difficulty, the possibility of making it worse. Behind them, Dr. Lang appeared as if summoned by the scent of risk. He snapped a pair of gloves on, jaw clenched. "This is a high-profile patient," he said. "Everything is documented, every step followed. Do not move without clearance." "We do not have time for clearance," the anesthesiologist said. Sweat beaded above his lip. "I cannot see properly. The edema is too rapid." Rourke's chest hitched. His oxygen saturation numbers tumbled down the monitor. 82, 79, 73. Riley stepped close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. Under the burns and soot under the uniform that had been half peeled away, she saw flashes of the man she remembered barking orders through a radio that squawked with static. Lieutenant, then. Laughing at some stupid joke one of the privates had made while they waited for evac. His eyes were swollen, almost shut now, but they flickered. She did not know if he saw anything through the narrow slits, but his body was still fighting. "If you force a tube through that," she said, "you bleed him and finish the swelling. He never breathes on his own again." Lang shot her a look. "You are not assigned to this case." "He is suffocating," Riley said. "You are arguing." Oxygen dipped to 68. The monitor alarm shrieked. The room tightened into a knot of bodies and equipment. "We prepare for a surgical airway," the anesthesiologist said. "Cricothyroidotomy." He reached for the kit. His hands did not stop shaking. Lang grabbed his wrist. "You are not cutting into a Marine colonel's throat without my sign-off." "If we wait for your sign-off, he dies," Riley said. She had already moved to the head of the bed. Her fingers found Rourke's jaw, tilted it gently. The smell of burned hair and flesh rose up thick and oily. She swallowed it. "Get me a scalpel and a crick kit," she said. No one moved. The moment stretched brittle and dangerous. Then Trevor reached for the tray. His voice was steady when he spoke. "Crick kit for Hart. Now." Hands scrambled. Metal clinked. The tools appeared in front of her, sterile in their blue packaging. Lang's voice climbed. "Ms. Hart, you will not touch this man. You are terminated. You have no authority here. Step away." His words came from somewhere far away. Riley heard instead the thin wheeze of air trying to force its way through a narrowing passage. She saw the skin at the base of Rourke's neck pulling in with each gasping breath, the strain of muscle and cartilage under her fingertips. She placed her left hand on his throat and felt for the landmarks. Thyroid cartilage. Cricoid. The small soft space between her fingers recognizing the map in burned terrain. She picked up the scalpel. "Time of last effective breath is almost gone," she said. "We cut now or we lose him." No one stopped her. The blade kissed the skin just below his Adam's apple and drew a precise line. Blood welled up bright against the charred tissue. She opened the space with 2 quick motions, creating a small dark mouth where there had been none. "Dilator," she said. It was pressed into her hand. She slid it in, spreading the opening without tearing more than necessary. Then the trach tube followed firm and sure, guided by muscle memory older than this hospital. Her world narrowed to the feel of resistance, the give, when the tube entered the trachea instead of soft tissue. When it seated, she connected it to the bag. "Ventilate," she ordered. The respiratory therapist squeezed the bag. Air flowed through the new passage with a sound that was almost obscene, a deep whoosh that filled his chest. The bruised rise and fall smoothed by degrees as oxygen found its way in. On the monitor, the oxygen saturation numbers slowed their fall, hesitated, then began to climb. 58, 65, 72. The room exhaled with him. Riley held the tube with her scarred arm braced along his neck, anchoring everything in place. "Secure it," she said quietly. Trevor taped the tube, his fingers moving with a speed he had not known he possessed. The anesthesiologist stepped back, staring. "I have never seen it done that fast." "It was not fast," Riley said. "It was on time." From the doorway someone whispered, "That is combat speed." Lang stood very still. His face had gone a pale, unhealthy color that had nothing to do with the hospital lights. He looked not at the man whose life had just been dragged back from the brink, but at the ring of staff around the bed. Their attention was not on him. It had not been for some time. A new sound grew low and distant at first, a deep, steady thump that vibrated in the walls. Dust trembled loose from the ceiling tiles. "Helicopter," someone said. The rotor noise intensified until it sat inside their chests. A shadow passed over the skylight in the corridor. The building seemed to crouch under the weight of the machine settling onto the rooftop pad. Lang straightened his coat as if that could settle the shaking inside him. "What is that about?" he muttered. They found out less than a minute later. The main ER doors slid open again this time to admit 3 officers in dark dress uniforms. They did not pause at the reception desk. They did not sign the visitor log. They walked through with the unhurried precision of people who knew they did not need permission to be anywhere. At their head was a Navy officer with the rank of commander on his shoulders. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing soft in his eyes. He took in the scene in a single pass. The burn victim with the fresh trach. The staff ringed around the bed. The nurse with the scarred arm still resting along the side of the patient's neck. He stopped at the foot of the bed. "Chief Petty Officer Riley Hart," he said. "Ma'am." The word landed like a dropped stone. Riley lifted her head. Her hands did not leave Rourke. "Commander," she said. In the space between 2 heartbeats, every civilian in the room realized 2 things. Riley outranked someone, and it was not them. The commander and the 2 officers behind him snapped into a crisp salute, hands sharp at their brows. The gesture was directed at Riley, not at Lang, not at the hospital logo on the wall. Conversation in the surrounding bays died. The only sounds left were monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen. The commander dropped his salute and let his gaze sweep the room again. "I am Commander Avery Cole," he said. "United States Navy. I am here under orders from the Department of the Navy to assume authority over Chief Petty Officer Hart's status and to review the circumstances of her termination." Lang found his voice. "This is my hospital," he said. The echoes of the helicopter rotors made his words sound smaller. "I am responsible for staffing decisions. That includes ending the employment of personnel who refuse to follow protocol." Cole turned his attention to him slowly. There was no hostility in his expression, which somehow made it worse. "Dr. Lang, we have reviewed your notice of termination," he said. "Chief Hart is an active asset in a classified readiness program known as Sentinel Harbor. Her placement here was not incidental. You removed her from duty while she was engaged in the immediate preservation of life, including the life of a senior Marine officer. That is a problem for us." Lang bristled. "She ignored MedCorps. She undermined my authority in front of my staff. She overstepped her scope." Cole took a step closer. His voice did not rise, but the air around them seemed to narrow. "Chief Hart has spent years treating trauma under conditions your system cannot model," he said. "Her service record includes multiple commendations for actions under fire. The Secretary of the Navy signed off on her assignment here. Your policies do not outrank that." He glanced at Rourke. "That Marine on your table is Lieutenant Colonel David Rourke. He is alive right now because Chief Hart acted while you hesitated." Lang opened his mouth, then shut it again. Cole nodded to the officer at his left, a major in Marine dress blues who had remained silent until then. "You are hereby relieved of any administrative authority over Chief Hart," the major said. His tone was formal and flat. "Effective immediately. You will surrender her personnel file and all related documentation to our team. You will not contact her in any capacity until this matter is resolved at a higher level." 2 men in dark suits had appeared in the doorway, badges at their belts. They did not touch Lang, but their presence bracketed him. "This is an overreach," Lang managed. "You cannot just walk into a civilian hospital and dictate policy." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Doctor, when a Marine colonel is dying on your table and your staff freezes and the one person who can open an airway is the person you fired for acting on her training, the question is not what we can do." His gaze hardened just enough to show the steel underneath. "The question is why you still think you are the one in charge." The silence that followed had a different weight to it. Not the quiet of fear, but the hush that fell when people saw a line redraw itself in front of them. Riley finally lifted her arm from Rourke's neck, the tube held steady, secured by tape in the hands of another nurse. She stepped away from the bed, fingers flexing as if remembering the feel of cartilage and steel. Lang looked at her. There was something like recognition there now, but it had nothing to do with respect. It was the dazed look of someone who had realized they had been standing in front of a moving train without knowing it. Riley did not offer him anger or triumph. Her expression was the same controlled calm she had worn when she walked in hours earlier. "You told me I was done here," she said. "I am not the one who decides that." She nodded once to Miguel, who stood straighter, then to Trevor and Jenna, who stared at her as if they were seeing more than one version of her layered over each other. Then she turned back to the patient, as if nothing in the room had changed except the number on his oxygen saturation. News traveled through St. Gabriel faster than any page. By the time Lieutenant Colonel Rourke was wheeled toward the burn unit, sedated and ventilated, the story had already broken into smaller versions of itself. Chief, Navy, Special Program, fired and reinstated in the same breath. Riley signed the last of the procedure notes with clean block letters. Her hand shook only once near the bottom of the page where no one would see unless they looked very close. She set the pen down and rubbed the heel of her palm against her ribs. The immediate crisis had passed its peak. The construction workers' pressure held. The other casualties from Bastion had been sorted, some stable, some not. The alarms had settled into their usual pattern, less frantic, more familiar. Outside Trauma 2, Miguel waited, resting his weight on the good leg. When she stepped into the hall, he straightened until the cane squeaked against the floor. "Chief," he said. The word sat awkwardly in his mouth after years of calling people by rank and last name. "Riley. I do not know which you prefer." She studied his face for a second. It still had dust caught along his hairline from when he had hovered in the bay. "Riley is fine," she said. He nodded. The cane clicked once as he shifted it. "I thought you died in that alley," he said quietly. "The blast went off and you were on top of Lieutenant Rourke. They pulled us back. We tried to get to you, but the whole street was on fire. Command said you were gone. They put your name on a wall." "I know," she replied. "I saw the wall after." Miguel swallowed. His eyes shone with something that had nothing to do with the harsh hospital lights. "I did not say thank you," he said. "Not then. Not really. I was too busy trying to stay upright and keep my own head from falling apart. You saved me. You did it again today just by being here and making some of these doctors move. You are on your feet," she said. "That is thanks enough." He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. "My physical therapist would disagree." She almost smiled. "You have an appointment to get to," she said. "Do not miss it." "Yes, ma'am," he said without thinking. The word hung between them, half habit, half respect. She did not correct him. In the staff lounge, someone had turned the television to a muted news channel. A scrolling ribbon at the bottom of the screen mentioned an incident at a military fuel depot outside Austin and unconfirmed reports of a Navy helicopter landing at a local hospital. The picture was just the hospital roof from a distance, grainy and flat. Jenna stood near the sink, fingers locked around a cup of water. She watched Riley enter as if bracing for impact. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You already stocked the crash carts," Riley answered. "That helps more." Jenna shook her head. Her voice came out rough. "I called you strange behind your back," she said. "Told people you were trying to show off. I saw your scar and made up stories. And when Lang started tightening the screws on you, I did not say anything. I just went along." Riley opened a cupboard, took down another paper cup, and filled it at the tap. The water ran steady and clear. "You did not know what you did not know," she said. "I knew enough," Jenna said. "I knew you were good, and I let myself be jealous. I am sorry." Riley took a sip of her water. It tasted like every hospital in every city. "You do not need my forgiveness to change how you work," she said. "Pay attention to your patients. Pay attention to your people. That will be enough." She did not say it with heat. It sounded like an instruction, the kind that belonged in a protocol manual no one had written yet. Later, when the shifts began to turn over and the worst of the day had blurred into chart entries and half-remembered shouts, Commander Cole found her near the nurses' station. "The bird is ready on the roof," he said. "We have a slot to get you to the secure facility for debrief and follow up." "Now?" she asked. He nodded. "Your reassignment orders already came through. Sentinel Harbor wants you back under their eye." She looked around the ER. The whiteboard showed fewer names than it had that morning. The MedCore X screen glowed in quiet colors. Trevor stood at a computer reviewing a trauma protocol he had never bothered to open before. Jenna adjusted a sling on a patient with uncharacteristic patience. "I need to check on one more person," Riley said. Rourke lay in a pre-op holding room on the same floor as the roof access. His burns had been dressed in careful layers, The new airway sat neat and clean at the base of his neck, held in place by white tape. His eyes fluttered open when she stepped inside. He tried to raise a hand. She caught it before the movement pulled at his injuries and set it back down with a gentle pressure. "Do not do that," she said. "You will tear something." His voice came out hoarse, warped by the tube and the damage to his throat. "I knew it," he managed. "Knew those hands. Thought I was dreaming hearing you yell at doctors again." She pulled a stool close to the bed. "You have always been bad at staying out of trouble," she said. He smiled with the side of his mouth that could manage it. A thin line cleared in the soot at the corner of his eye where a tear cut through. "Did they drag you back into the fight because of me?" he asked. "Because if they did, I owe you another apology. They sent me here long before you blew up your fuel depot," she said. "You are just very good at finding the center of the blast radius." He shut his eyes briefly, relief loosening his features. "Figures," he muttered. "They will take care of you now," she said. "Real burn team, real rehab. Do what they tell you." "Yes, Chief," he said. She hesitated, then reached out and laid her fingers lightly over his wrist. His pulse tapped back, stubborn and steady. "Stay," she said. "You are not done yet." On the roof, the air carried a cold bite. The helicopter waited with its rotors ticking slowly, a heavy shape against the darkening sky. The city spread out beyond the edge of the pad lights, flicking on in clusters, highway traffic already starting its evening crawl. The ER staff formed two lines along the path from the stairwell to the aircraft. Nurses, residents, techs, even a janitor with a mop still in his hand. None of them had been told to stand there. They came anyway. As Riley stepped through the door, they straightened. One by one, hands rose in a salute that was imperfect but earnest. Some put their fingers in the wrong place. Some hesitated halfway up. No one dropped their gaze. For the first time that day, a full, unguarded smile touched her face. It softened the hard edges the hospital lights had carved into her features. She paused, lifted her own hand, and returned the gesture with the easy precision of a habit learned long ago. Then she walked toward the waiting helicopter. The rotors picked up speed when, clawing at coats and scrubs tugging at hair. The noise swallowed conversation and left only gestures, nods, and the weight of what had been shared. From the parking lot, Miguel watched her climb aboard, one hand braced on the frame. The scar on her arm caught the last light, a pale line against worn fabric. Inside the cabin, Commander Cole buckled in across from her. The headset muffled some of the roar. "You could have stayed in the Navy full-time," he said, his voice crisp in her ears. "Taken a billet with less chaos. Why civilian ER work between assignments?" She looked out the window. The hospital roof fell away. The city shifted beneath them, a grid of streets and headlights and anonymous lives. "Out there," she said, "no one expects anything special from me. They just need someone who shows up when they are bleeding and scared. I can do that without waiting for a war." She flexed her fingers, feeling the phantom echo of bone under her palms, the warmth of pulses that had refused to quit. "That is enough," she added. The helicopter tilted toward the horizon. St. Gabriel shrank to a square of light behind them. The next morning, two men in plain suits arrived at the hospital and left with Dr. Lang following between them. There were no raised voices, no dramatic scenes. He carried a box with a framed certificate sticking out of the top. He did not look at anyone. Later that week, maintenance installed a small brass plaque on the wall beside the staff time clock and the air's logo, no hospital branding, just a single line of engraved text. "Never judge the quiet ones. You do not know their wars." People brushed past it for days without really seeing it. Then one night, during a lull between calls, Trevor stopped and read it twice. Jenna paused beside him. Neither of them said anything. Behind them, the doors opened to admit another patient. Monitors chimed, hands moved, the work went on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.